3I Atlas has reappeared from behind the sun with a baffling glow. And something strange is happening. Right now, at this very moment, the most mysterious object ever tracked by human telescopes is back. But it is not the same. The light coming from this interstellar visitor defies every known law of cometary physics. The trajectory has shifted in ways that gravity alone cannot explain. And the world's top scientists are quietly asking a question that most of them are too afraid to say out loud. What if this is not natural? You clicked on this video because you sensed something. Maybe it was the title, maybe it was the thumbnail, or maybe it was something deeper. An intuition that the universe is about to reveal one of its most profound secrets. And you would be right. Because what happened to 3I Atlas during its passage behind the sun represents more than just an astronomical curiosity. It represents a potential shift in how we understand reality itself. The object that emerged from the solar shadow is exhibiting properties that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about what is possible in this dimension of existence. But before we dive into the impossible physics and the theories that will reshape your understanding of consciousness and reality, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to understand what 3I Atlas was before it disappeared and why its return has sent shockwaves through the global scientific community and beyond. 3I Atlas was first detected on September 2nd of last year by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, the ATLAS survey in Hawaii. From the very first observation, something was wrong. The object was moving at a velocity that immediately identified it as interstellar in origin. It was not bound by our sun's gravity. It had come from the depths of space between the stars, a visitor from another solar system, perhaps from another era of cosmic history entirely. Only the second confirmed interstellar object ever detected by humanity, 3I Atlas joined the infamous Oumuamua in that exclusive category of cosmic travelers that originate beyond our stellar neighborhood. But while Oumuamua was strange, 3I Atlas was stranger. Oumuamua had exhibited weird acceleration that scientists struggled to explain with conventional cometary outgassing models. Some researchers proposed exotic explanations, from hydrogen icebergs to light sails propelled by alien civilizations. But 3I Atlas took the mystery to an entirely different level. Its initial brightness fluctuations suggested it was tumbling through space in a chaotic rotation pattern. Its spectral signature hinted at a composition unlike anything in our solar system's catalog of known materials. And its trajectory, when plotted backwards through galactic space, traced a path that seemed to originate from a region of the Milky Way where very few stars exist. It came from the void between stellar nurseries, from the cold darkness where nothing should be moving at such incredible speeds. The global astronomical community mobilized immediately. Telescopes across every continent locked onto the object's predicted path. Radio arrays swept its position looking for any electromagnetic emissions. Space agencies began calculating whether any existing spacecraft could be redirected for a flyby mission, though everyone knew the answer would be no. Interstellar objects move too fast and they give too little warning. By the time we see them, they are already leaving. But 3I Atlas had one characteristic that made it different from Oumuamua. Its trajectory would take it extremely close to the sun, closer than Mercury, close enough that the intense solar radiation would either tear it apart or cause it to outgas and brighten dramatically. Scientists knew they would have one brief window to study this object when it reached perihelion, its closest approach to our star. And then it would disappear behind the sun from Earth's perspective for several weeks. That disappearance is what everyone was talking about in the months leading up to the solar passage. Would 3I Atlas survive? Comets that pass too close to the sun often fragment or evaporate completely. The tidal forces alone, the differential gravitational pull on the near side versus the far side of the object, are enough to rip apart anything that is not structurally solid. And the radiation, the incredible torrent of high-energy photons and particles streaming from the sun's corona, can vaporize ice and even break down certain rock formations. Some scientists predicted that 3I Atlas would not survive the encounter. Others argued that its interstellar origin meant it might be composed of materials compressed and hardened by the cold of deep space, making it more resilient than ordinary solar system comets. The last observations before it vanished behind the sun showed something unsettling. 3I Atlas was getting brighter, but not in the way comets normally brighten. A typical comet approaching the sun will develop a visible coma, a hazy cloud of gas and dust blown off its surface by the increasing heat. That coma scatters sunlight, creating the familiar fuzzy appearance of comets in amateur telescopes. But 3I Atlas was brightening without developing a proportional coma. Its brightness was increasing faster than the outgassing models predicted. It was almost as if the object itself was glowing, not just reflecting sunlight or scattering it through a dust cloud. Spectroscopic analysis, which breaks down the light from an object into its component wavelengths to determine composition, showed some expected cometary signatures like carbon compounds and water ice. But there were also anomalies, emission lines that did not match any known cometary material. Absorption features that suggested the presence of complex organic molecules, far more complex than the simple ices and rock grains found in typical comets. And then it disappeared. It slipped behind the sun's glare into the zone where Earth-based telescopes cannot observe because the sun's overwhelming brightness drowns out everything in its vicinity. For 3 weeks, 3I Atlas was hidden. During those 3 weeks, the speculation intensified. Astronomers posted preprint papers proposing dozens of different models to explain the object's behavior. Some suggested it was a fragment of a disrupted exoplanet, a chunk of a world destroyed billions of years ago in some distant stellar system, now wandering the galaxy as an orphaned relic. Others proposed it might be a highly porous aggregate held together loosely like a rubble pile, which would explain some of the unusual rotation and brightness patterns. A few voices, usually on the fringes of academic respectability, whispered about artificial origins. They pointed to the anomalous acceleration, the strange spectral features, and the improbable trajectory as potential indicators of something designed rather than natural. Those voices were largely dismissed, not because the evidence was weak, but because the implications were too vast to accept without extraordinary proof. The Irish global anticipation built day by day. Astronomy forums buzzed with predictions. Amateur astronomers plotted the date when 3I Atlas should emerge from behind the sun, calculating the optimal viewing locations and times. Space agencies quietly adjusted the schedules of orbital observatories to ensure they would be pointed at the right patch of sky at the moment of reemergence. There was a collective holding of breath across the scientific community, because everyone understood that this was a unique moment in history. No interstellar object had ever been observed this closely during a solar encounter. Whatever happened to 3I Atlas, whatever state it emerged in, would provide invaluable data about the composition and structural integrity of objects from beyond our solar system. It would tell us something profound about the materials and conditions in other parts of the galaxy. It would expand our cosmic perspective in ways that even the most optimistic researchers could barely articulate. But what no one expected, what no one could have predicted, was that 3I Atlas would come back fundamentally changed. Not just changed in the sense of being slightly brighter or dimmer. Not just changed in terms of having shed some surface layers to solar heating. Changed in a way that violated the known physics of how cometary objects behave. When 3I Atlas reappeared, it was glowing. Not reflecting, not scattering, glowing. The object was emitting its own light in a way that had no precedent in the entire catalog of cometary observations. The brightness had increased by a factor of 10, far beyond what any sublimation of ice or outgassing of volatile compounds could produce. Spectroscopic analysis showed the emission was coming from the entire surface of the object, not from discrete jets or vents as would be expected from a comet releasing trapped gases. The spectrum itself was bizarre. It contained emission lines associated with extremely high energy processes. Ionized atoms that should only exist in the coronas of stars or in the violent environs around black holes. Yet here they were, streaming off an object roughly 2 kilometers across. An object that should be cold, inert, a frozen remnant from the construction phase of some alien solar system. The scientific community scrambled to explain it. Papers were published within days, each proposing different mechanisms. Some suggested that the intense solar radiation had triggered a runaway chemical reaction in exotic materials within the object's interior. perhaps crystalline structures that, when heated, release stored energy in a cascade effect. Others proposed that the object was hollow, that it contained pressurized volatiles that were now escaping through fractures created by thermal stress, ionizing as they interacted with the solar wind. A few bold researchers suggested that the object might have captured and stored energy during its close approach to the sun, and was now releasing that energy in a controlled manner, like a battery discharging. That last hypothesis was the most controversial because it implied a level of organization and functionality that bordered on technology. But the data kept getting stranger. The rotation period, which had been chaotic and unpredictable before the solar passage, was now stable and regular. 3I Atlas was spinning at a constant rate, completing one rotation every 4.7 hours, with no wobble, no precession, no variation. This kind of stable rotation usually requires an object to be either perfectly symmetrical or to have internal mass distribution carefully balanced. Natural objects, especially those that have been through the violent process of close solar passage, do not exhibit this kind of perfect stability. They tumble, they fragment, they eject material asymmetrically. Yet 3I Atlas was spinning like a precision instrument. The trajectory also showed anomalies. While the object was still following a hyperbolic path that would eventually take it out of the solar system, there were small deviations from the predicted course. These deviations were not random. They were corrective. Each time the object's path was recalculated based on new observations, it was found to be adjusting in ways that could not be explained by gravitational perturbations from the planets or by the rocket effect from outgassing. It was as if something was steering. The adjustments were tiny, measured in kilometers over millions of kilometers of travel, but they were there, consistent, and oriented in a specific direction. The direction, when traced forward through galactic space, pointed toward a region of the Milky Way that was unremarkable except for one feature. It contained a star system approximately 400 light-years away that had recently been identified as having multiple exoplanets in its habitable zone. This correlation was noted but dismissed as coincidence by most researchers. Space is vast. Any trajectory, if extended far enough, will point toward something interesting. But the coincidence troubled a few scientists who began to wonder if they were observing something that challenged the boundary between natural and artificial. The public response to the reappearance of 3I Atlas was muted at first. News outlets reported the brightening as a scientific curiosity, a comet that survived a close brush with the sun. But as the details emerged, as amateur astronomers began posting images showing the object's eerie glow, as forums filled with speculation about the anomalous behavior, the story gained traction. It spread through social media not as news but as mystery, as something that did not fit the comfortable narratives of predictable astronomy. Within a week, 3I Atlas had become a cultural phenomenon. People who had never looked through a telescope were suddenly interested in an object millions of kilometers away. Artists created renditions of the glowing visitor. Musicians composed pieces inspired by its journey. Philosophers wrote essays about what it meant for humanity's place in the cosmos if we were being visited by something that might be more than just a rock. The scientific establishment tried to maintain composure. Press releases emphasized that while the object's behavior was unusual, it was not necessarily inexplicable. They pointed out that comets have surprised us before, that our models are imperfect, that the universe is full of phenomena we do not yet understand. This measured response was appropriate and scientifically honest, but it also created a vacuum that was quickly filled by more sensational interpretations. Fringe researchers and conspiracy theorists seized on the anomalies as proof of extraterrestrial visitation. They compiled lists of all the ways 3I Atlas deviated from expected behavior and argued that the only coherent explanation was artificial origin. Some claimed it was a probe sent by an advanced civilization to study our solar system. Others suggested it was a derelict vessel, damaged or abandoned, now drifting through space but still retaining enough functionality to emit energy and maintain orientation. A few went further, proposing that the object's appearance was not random but timed, that it had been sent specifically to arrive at this moment in human history when we were technologically capable of detecting and studying it, but not yet capable of intercepting or communicating with it. These interpretations were dismissed by mainstream science, but they resonated with a certain segment of the population. People who felt that the universe was more mysterious and purposeful than the reductionist scientific worldview allowed. People who intuited that consciousness and intelligence might be woven into the fabric of reality in ways that went beyond biological evolution on isolated planets. People who were ready, even eager, for confirmation that we are not alone, that the cosmos is filled with mind, with intention, with entities that operate on scales and timelines beyond human comprehension. You are one of those people. That is why you are still here, reading these words, following this story to its deeper implications. You sensed from the beginning that 3i Atlas was more than an astronomical event. It was a signal, a catalyst, a mirror reflecting something about the nature of reality that you have always suspected but could never quite articulate. What if the object's behavior is not just strange physics, but a demonstration of principles that bridge science and consciousness? What if the glow is not random emission, but a form of communication, a beacon, broadcasting on frequencies that our instruments can detect but our paradigms cannot yet interpret? What if the trajectory corrections are not mechanical thrust, but the application of something closer to intention, a form of navigation that operates through dimensional shifts rather than chemical propulsion? These questions sound like science fiction, but they emerge naturally from the data if you are willing to follow the implications without retreating into comfortable skepticism. The truth is that consciousness and matter are not separate categories. They are different expressions of a unified field, a fundamental reality that some call the quantum field, others call universal mind, and still others simply call God. Modern physics has been converging on this understanding through the study of quantum mechanics, which reveals that observation collapses wave functions, that the act of measuring determines the state of reality at the particle level. This is not philosophy, this is experimentally verified science. The double-slit experiment, quantum entanglement, the observer effect, all of these phenomena demonstrate that consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping physical reality. If this is true at the quantum level, and if everything in the universe, including interstellar objects and human brains, is made of quantum particles, then it follows that consciousness must play a role at all scales, not just in collapsing particle states, but in organizing matter, in guiding evolution, in structuring the emergence of complexity from simplicity. This is the hidden truth that both ancient spiritual traditions and cutting-edge physics are pointing toward. Reality is not a mechanical system running on autopilot. It is a participatory phenomenon where consciousness and form co-create through continuous interaction. You are not a passive observer watching a universe that would exist the same way whether you were here or not. You are an active participant whose awareness, attention, and intention shape the unfolding of events in ways both subtle and profound. 3i Atlas, if it is indeed more than just a rock, would represent a manifestation of consciousness, operating at a scale and sophistication far beyond current human capability. But it would not be fundamentally different in kind from what you do every day when you focus your attention, make decisions, and navigate the probabilistic landscape of your life. The only difference would be in degree, in coherence, in the level of mastery over the principles that govern how consciousness interacts with matter and energy. Consider what it would take for an object to navigate through interstellar space with apparent intention. It would need to sense its environment, processing information about gravitational fields, radiation, the positions and velocities of nearby objects. It would need to maintain internal coherence across billions of years and trillions of kilometers, resisting entropy and decay through some form of self-organization. It would need to make course corrections based on goals that might span timescales so vast that entire civilizations rise and fall in what is, from its perspective, a brief moment. These requirements sound impossible for a physical object. How could an assemblage of matter, no matter how sophisticated, maintain function across such scales without degrading? But what if the object is not just matter? What if it is matter organized and animated by a non-local consciousness, a field of awareness that does not depend on continuous physical structure but instead uses matter as a temporary vehicle, a locus of expression? This is not as far-fetched as it might sound. Your own body is such a vehicle. The atoms in your body are replaced completely every 7 to 10 years. The physical matter that constitutes you today is not the same matter that constituted you a decade ago, yet you persist. Your memories, your sense of identity, your consciousness continues unbroken even as the material substrate constantly changes. What maintains continuity is not the matter itself, but the pattern, the information structure, the organizing principle that we might call consciousness or soul. If this principle can maintain coherence in a biological body subject to constant molecular turnover, why could it not maintain coherence in other substrates? In crystalline structures, in plasma fields, in configurations of matter that we have not yet imagined? The universe is far more creative than we give it credit for. Life, consciousness, intelligence, these are not anomalies that arose by accident on one small planet. They are fundamental features of reality that express themselves in countless forms across all scales. 3i Atlas might be one such form. Not a spaceship in the conventional sense, not a machine built by engineers, but a living system that bridges the gap between what we call matter and what we call mind. An entity that thinks with its entire structure, that navigates through consciousness as much as through physics, that exists in dimensions we can only detect indirectly through the shadows it casts in our three-dimensional space. If this interpretation is correct, then what we are witnessing is not just an astronomical event, but a contact scenario. Not contact in the sense of little green men landing on the White House lawn, but contact in the sense of our collective consciousness touching something vast and other, something that operates on principles we are just beginning to glimpse. The response to this contact is not primarily technological. Building bigger telescopes or faster spacecraft will not bridge the gap. The response is consciousness expansion. It is learning to operate with the same principles that allow 3i Atlas to navigate through space and time with apparent intention. It is recognizing that you are not a separate, isolated self trapped in a body, but a focal point of universal consciousness, a localized expression of the same intelligence that moves galaxies and guides interstellar visitors. This is why the story of 3i Atlas matters to you personally, even if you have no interest in astronomy, because it is a mirror showing you what is possible when consciousness transcends the limitations of conventional physics. The object demonstrates that reality is more fluid, more responsive, more navigable than the materialist worldview suggests. And if an interstellar object can exhibit these properties, then so can you, because you are made of the same fundamental substance, animated by the same universal intelligence. The principles of manifestation, which you have been studying and practicing, are not metaphors or psychological tricks. They are applications of the same laws that allow 3i Atlas to glow with its own light and adjust its trajectory through the void. When you focus your intention, you are not just thinking positively or hoping for the best. You are collapsing quantum possibilities, organizing probability fields, navigating through the infinite parallel timelines that quantum physics tells us exist in superposition. Every moment contains infinite potential outcomes. Which outcome manifests depends on where consciousness places its attention. This is the observer effect extended from particles to light. You observe not just with your eyes, but with your entire being. Your beliefs, your emotions, your expectations, these are all forms of observation that collapse the wave function of your life. If you observe from a paradigm of limitation, scarcity, and separation, you collapse realities that reflect those qualities. If you observe from a paradigm of abundance, connection, and infinite possibility, you collapse realities that reflect those qualities instead. The universe does not judge which paradigm is true. It simply responds to the observational stance you take, manifesting circumstances that match your expectations. This is why inner work is so crucial. Changing your external circumstances without changing your internal paradigm is like trying to change what a projector displays by painting the screen. The image will shift temporarily, but will snap back to whatever the projector is programmed to show. You must change the program, the lens, the light source. You must shift the consciousness that observes and interprets reality. 3i Atlas serves as a reminder that this is possible. The object emerged from its solar passage transformed because it interacted with intense energy in a way that catalyzed change rather than destruction. You are being offered a similar opportunity. The intense energies moving through your life right now, the challenges and disruptions, are not punishments or obstacles, they are catalysts. They are solar passages that can either destroy you or transform you depending on how you navigate them. The key is to maintain internal coherence while embracing external flux. To stay centered in your knowing even as circumstances shift. To trust that the process serves a purpose even when the purpose is not yet visible. 3i. Atlas maintained structural integrity through forces that should have torn it apart. It did this not by resisting the sun's power, but by absorbing and transforming that power into a new form of expression. This is your task as well. Do not resist the intensity of your transformation. Do not try to hold yourself together by clinging to old identities and familiar patterns. Instead, allow the old structures to dissolve while maintaining the core essence of who you are. Let the solar fire burn away what is false, what is borrowed, what is merely conditioned response. What remains will be your true self, glowing with its own light, navigating with its own intelligence. The process is not comfortable. Transformation never is, but it is necessary if you are to step into the role you incarnated to play. You did not come here to live a small, safe, predictable life. You came here to demonstrate what is possible when consciousness awakens to its creative power. You came here to be a bridge between the old paradigm of separation and the new paradigm of unity. You came here to glow with your own light, to navigate by your own inner compass, to show others that the limitations they accept as absolute are actually optional. This is not grandiosity. This is recognition of your true nature. Every human being is a localized expression of infinite consciousness. Most simply never realize it. They live their entire lives thinking they are separate, limited, powerless entities at the mercy of external forces. But you are waking up from that dream. You are remembering what you really are. And as you remember, you begin to access capabilities that seem miraculous from within the dream, but are perfectly natural from the awakened state. The ability to influence probability, the ability to synchronize with beneficial timelines, the ability to manifest desires not through struggle but through alignment. These are not superpowers granted to special people. They are natural functions of consciousness, operating from its true level of being rather than from the contracted, egoic state most people inhabit. 3i Atlas is glowing because it is expressing its essential nature without constraint. You will glow when you do the same, not literally with visible light, though that might happen to some degree as your energy field intensifies. But metaphorically, as you radiate presence, purpose, and power that others can sense even if they cannot explain it. People will be drawn to you without knowing why. Opportunities will appear that align perfectly with your intentions. Obstacles will dissolve or reveal themselves as disguised blessings. This is what happens when you stop fighting reality and start navigating it from a place of conscious awareness. The trajectory of your life, like the trajectory of 3i Atlas, can be adjusted, not through force, not through controlling external circumstances, but through shifting the consciousness from which you observe and act. Every choice you make is a course correction. Every thought you think is a small adjustment to your trajectory through probability space. Cumulatively, these adjustments determine where you end up. Most people make choices unconsciously, reacting to circumstances rather than creating them. They let their trajectory be determined by gravity, by the pull of conditioning, culture, and collective belief. But you can choose differently. You can be the interstellar visitor, the object that enters the system from outside, that follows its own path regardless of the local gravitational field. This requires breaking free from consensus reality. It requires questioning assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. It requires trusting your inner guidance, even when it contradicts external authorities. This is the path of the sovereign creator. It is not easy, but it is infinitely more rewarding than passive submission to a reality you did not consciously choose. The scientists studying 3i Atlas are trying to fit it into existing models. When that fails, they create more complex models. But they are still operating within a paradigm that assumes material causation, that insists effects must follow from physical causes. What if the object is not following physical laws but expressing consciousness principles? What if its behavior makes perfect sense from a perspective that includes non-local awareness, intentionality, and dimensional navigation as fundamental features of reality? You do not need to wait for scientists to figure this out. You can begin applying these principles in your own life immediately. Start by observing your automatic reactions to events. Notice how you habitually interpret circumstances as good or bad, as confirmation or contradiction of your beliefs. These interpretations are not neutral observations, they are creative acts that shape what comes next. When something unexpected happens, instead of immediately labeling it and reacting from old patterns, pause. Ask yourself, what if this is perfect? What if this event, regardless of how it appears, is actually serving my highest evolution? What possibility is trying to emerge through this situation? By asking these questions, you shift from passive victim to active creator. You stop letting circumstances dictate your reality and start using circumstances as raw material for conscious creation. This does not mean denying genuine challenges or pretending that difficulties do not exist. It means recognizing that the meaning of any event is not fixed but fluid, and you have tremendous influence over which meaning solidifies. Two people lose their jobs. One sees it as disaster, confirmation that the world is unsafe and they are inadequate. The other sees it as liberation, an opportunity to finally pursue what they really want. Same event, different interpretation, radically different outcomes. The first person collapses a timeline of struggle and limitation. The second collapses a timeline of expansion and fulfillment. Neither interpretation is objectively true or false. Both are true in the reality they create through the act of being believed and embodied. This is the power you possess, not power over external circumstances, though that may develop as you master the principles, but power over meaning, over interpretation, over which of the infinite potential realities you collapse into manifestation through your focused attention. The glow of 3i Atlas is not just photons being emitted from its surface. It is information being broadcast. Not information in the form of language or data packets, but information in the form of demonstration. The object is showing us what matter looks like when it is infused with consciousness, when it operates from a level of organization that transcends local causation. You are capable of the same demonstration. Your body, your life, your entire field of experience can glow with coherence and purpose when you align with your deepest truth and stop fragmenting your energy through doubt, distraction, and resistance. The spiritual traditions speak of enlightenment, of becoming a light unto yourself. This is not metaphor. It is a description of what happens when consciousness operates at full capacity without the static of egoic interference. You become luminous, radiating a frequency that influences everything around you. Others might not understand why they feel uplifted or inspired in your presence. They might attribute it to your personality or charisma. But the real source is the coherence of your being, the alignment of your consciousness with universal intelligence. This is the goal of all genuine spiritual practice, not to escape the world or transcend the body, but to bring heaven to earth, to embody divinity in human form, to demonstrate that matter and spirit are not separate but different octaves of the same reality. 3i Atlas, if it is indeed an expression of advanced consciousness, achieved this integration. It navigates physical space while maintaining dimensional awareness. It responds to material forces while expressing non-material intention. It is simultaneously particle and wave, matter and consciousness, object and subject. This is the integration you are learning, not to choose between being spiritual or being practical, between focusing on inner development or outer achievement, but to recognize that true mastery includes both. That the highest expression of consciousness is through form, not despite it. The dimensional hypothesis suggests that reality has more dimensions than the 3 spatial and 1 temporal dimension we normally perceive. These additional dimensions are not physical spaces you could travel to in a spacecraft. They are degrees of freedom, levels of organization, scales of being that exist right here but outside the bandwidth of ordinary perception. When you expand your consciousness, you are not going somewhere else. You are becoming aware of dimensions that were always present but previously invisible. Like a fish becoming aware of water, or a character in a novel becoming aware of the page. The realization does not change what is, but it radically changes what you can do, because once you perceive additional dimensions, you can navigate them. You can move through probability space, shifting between timelines that were previously fixed from your perspective. You can access information and resources that were previously beyond reach. You can influence outcomes in ways that seem miraculous to those still operating in the flattened consensus reality. This is not fantasy. This is the practical application of insights from quantum physics, consciousness research, and millennia of mystical exploration. The tools are attention, intention, and imagination. Attention determines what you observe, and observation collapses possibilities into actuality. Intention provides direction, organizing the quantum field towards specific outcomes. Imagination allows you to conceive of possibilities beyond your current experience, giving the field templates to manifest. When these three operate in harmony, focused on a clear goal without internal contradiction, manifestation becomes not just possible but inevitable. Not through struggle or force, but through alignment with how reality actually works. The universe is not your enemy requiring conquest. It is your creative partner responding to the signals you broadcast through your state of being. 3i Atlas broadcasts a signal through its glow, its trajectory, its anomalous behavior. That signal is not meant for radio receivers or optical telescopes, though they can detect its physical manifestation. The signal is meant for consciousness. It is a transmission saying, here is what is possible. Here's a demonstration that the laws you think are fixed are actually guidelines that can be transcended by sufficiently organized awareness. Here is proof that you are not alone, not in the sense that there are other biological species scattered through the cosmos, but in the sense that consciousness is universal, that intelligence permeates reality at all levels, and that you are connected to a vast network of awareness that extends far beyond your individual identity. This connection is not something you need to establish. It already exists. You are always part of the universal consciousness, just as a wave is always part of the ocean. But you can be aware or unaware of that connection. You can identify as the wave, seeing yourself as separate and fragile, or you can identify as the ocean expressing itself as a wave, recognizing your true nature as the infinite appearing temporarily in finite form. The shift from wave identity to ocean identity is enlightenment. It does not require you to stop being a wave, to dissolve back into the ocean and lose all individual characteristics. It requires recognizing that waveness and oceanness are not contradictory but complementary, that you can maintain your unique expression while knowing yourself as the whole. From this expanded identity, everything changes. You stop being afraid because you realize there is nothing that can be lost. The wave will eventually return to the ocean, but the ocean never goes anywhere. What you truly are is indestructible, eternal, always has been, and always will be. The fears and anxieties that dominate so much of human life are based on forgetting this truth. Once remembered, they lose their power. You stop seeking validation because you realize you are the source, not the recipient. The opinions of others, whether praise or criticism, are just ripples on the surface. They cannot define or diminish what you actually are. You stop competing because you realize that another wave's height has no bearing on your own. There is no scarcity in the ocean. There is room for infinite expressions, infinite waves, each unique and each equally part of the whole. 3i Atlas embodies this principle. It does not compete with other objects for resources or space. It does not define itself in opposition to anything. It simply is, moving through space with the confidence that comes from being aligned with universal forces rather than fighting against them. You can embody the same principle, not by being passive or avoiding challenge, but by acting from centered power rather than desperate striving. When you know yourself as the ocean, you move through life with grace and certainty. You take action when inspired, rest when needed, and trust the process completely. This trust is not blind faith, it is recognition based on direct experience. That reality responds to consciousness, that you are always creating whether you realize it or not, and that conscious creation from alignment produces far better results than unconscious creation from fear. The practice is simple but not easy. Simple because it requires nothing external, no tools or techniques beyond your own awareness. Not easy because it requires you to release deeply conditioned patterns of thought and behavior, to stand apart from collective belief, and to maintain your center in a world that constantly encourages fragmentation and distraction. But the rewards are immeasurable. As you practice dimensional navigation, as you learn to collapse timelines consciously, as you remember yourself as the ocean rather than just the wave, you begin to experience life as it was meant to be experienced. Not as a struggle for survival, not as a series of problems to solve, but as an adventure in consciousness, an exploration of infinite possibility, a creative collaboration between your individual awareness and the universal intelligence that animates all things. 3. Atlas is showing you this possibility through its very existence, not by landing and explaining itself, not by sending messages in decipherable language, but by being a living demonstration of consciousness operating beyond conventional limitations. The object is a seed thought planted in the collective mind of humanity. Not everyone will germinate that seed. Most will dismiss the object as an anomaly, a curiosity that does not require any shift in worldview. But some will feel the seed take root. They will sense that something profound is being communicated beneath the surface level of scientific data and astronomical observation. They will begin to wonder, to question, to explore possibilities that were previously inconceivable. You are among those who feel the seed taking root. That is why this transmission found you, why you have read this far, why something in you resonates with the idea that reality is far more malleable and consciousness far more powerful than you have been taught. This resonance is not random, it is recognition. Your deeper self, the part of you that exists beyond the conditioned personality, knows these truths. It has always known them. The only question is whether you will allow that knowing to move from the background to the foreground of your awareness, whether you will let it guide your choices and shape your experience. If you choose to do this, you join a growing number of people across the planet who are waking up to their creative power, who are learning to navigate reality consciously rather than reactively. This is not a movement in the conventional sense. There are no leaders, no organizations, no official membership. It is simply a shift in consciousness happening simultaneously in many individuals. A collective awakening that is accelerating as more people remember what they truly are. 3i Atlas, appearing at this particular moment in human history, is part of that acceleration. It is a catalyst, a trigger, a signal amplifying the message that consciousness is primary, that reality is participatory, and that the age of passive victimhood is ending for those ready to step into their creative sovereignty. The object will eventually leave our solar system, continuing its journey through the galaxy, but the impact of its passage will remain in the scientific papers attempting to explain its anomalous properties, in the cultural conversations about what it might represent, and most importantly, in the individual consciousnesses who recognize the deeper message and chose to apply it. You are one of those consciousnesses, not because you are special in the sense of being separate from others, but because you are remembering what is special about all humans, what is unique about this species, what you came here to express and demonstrate. The human experiment is consciousness exploring itself through self-aware biological forms, learning to navigate physical reality while maintaining connection to non-physical dimensions. It is a challenging game, and many players get so absorbed in the physicality that they forget they are more than their bodies, more than their personal histories, more than the roles they play. But you are remembering. And as you remember, you begin to play the game differently, not with less passion or engagement, but with more joy and less fear. Because you know it is a game, that you chose to play it, and that no matter what happens within it, your essential being remains untouched. From this place of remembering, you can fully embrace being human, while also accessing the resources of your infinite nature. You can face challenges without being overwhelmed. You can take risks without being paralyzed. You can love deeply without being destroyed by loss. This is the balanced integration that spiritual traditions point toward when they speak of being in the world but not of it. You participate fully in the human experience while maintaining awareness of your transcendent nature. The trajectory corrections of 3i Atlas demonstrate this balance. The object moves through space subject to gravitational forces, following physical laws, interacting with the material environment. Yet it also maintains a direction that reflects non-local intention, a purpose that transcends immediate physical causation. This is the model for conscious living. You engage with the physical world, paying bills, maintaining relationships, caring for your body. But you do it from a level of awareness that recognizes these activities as temporary expressions rather than ultimate reality. You take them seriously without being serious, engaging fully while remaining fundamentally playful. This is not spiritual bypassing, not using transcendent perspective to avoid real-world responsibilities. It is mature integration, bringing the wisdom of expanded consciousness into everyday activity. The result is effectiveness without attachment, passion without desperation, commitment without rigidity. You become like water, flowing around obstacles rather than crashing against them, always finding the path of least resistance while maintaining clear direction toward the ocean. The ocean is your ultimate destination, the I, return to source that concludes this particular adventure in form. But you are not in a hurry to get there because you understand that you never left. The journey is not away from the ocean and back to it, but the ocean exploring itself through the temporary experience of seeming separation. There is no urgency, no deadline, no failure possible. There is only experience, learning, growth, and the gradual remembering of what you always were. 3. Atlas moves through space on a million-year journey. From its perspective, if it has one, the weeks spent near our sun were a brief moment. Yet those weeks generated enormous attention, countless hours of observation, intense debate, and speculation. The object did not need this attention. It would have continued on its path regardless of whether any conscious beings noticed or cared. But the attention serves a purpose, not for the object but for those who observe it. You're being given a mirror. In the strange behavior of an interstellar visitor, you are seeing reflected your own potential for anomalous behavior, for defying the expectations of your conditioning, for glowing with your own light rather than merely reflecting the light of others. The scientists trying to explain 3I Atlas using conventional models are like your rational mind trying to explain your intuition using logic. It does not work because the phenomenon operates from a different level than the explanation. You cannot explain consciousness using only material concepts any more than you can explain music using only mathematics. The mathematics describes patterns in the music, but it does not capture what music is, what it does to consciousness, why it moves people to tears or ecstasy. Similarly, the physical measurements of 3I Atlas describe its position, velocity, spectral signature. But they do not capture what it is, what it represents, why it moves some observers to wonder if they are witnessing something that transcends the known. You know in your depths that the transcendent is real, that there is more to existence than the material world, that consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of brain chemistry, but the fundamental ground from which all else arises. This knowing has probably been with you your entire life, sometimes faint and buried under layers of conditioning, sometimes vivid and undeniable. The appearance of 3I Atlas is a validation of that knowing. It is external confirmation of internal truth. You do not need external confirmation. Your knowing is valid whether or not an interstellar object behaves strangely. But confirmation helps. It strengthens resolve. It makes it easier to trust your intuition when you see evidence in the physical world that reality is indeed more mysterious than consensus allows. Use this confirmation wisely. Let it bolster your commitment to conscious creation without becoming dependent on external signs. The universe is always providing signs for those who know how to look. Synchronicities, coincidences, unlikely encounters that seem orchestrated by some intelligence beyond chance. These are breadcrumbs along the path, encouragement from the universe that you are heading in the right direction. But they are not the path itself. The path is your consciousness, your choices, your moment-by-moment decision about which reality to collapse through your observation and intention. Do not wait for more signs before committing fully to your creative power. Do not demand more proof before trusting your ability to navigate probability space. The proof will come as you practice, as you experiment, as you apply the principles and observe the results. Start small if that feels safer. Choose some aspect of your life that is not working and apply dimensional thinking to it. Instead of asking how to fix the problem, ask which version of you exists in a timeline where this is not a problem. Instead of trying to figure out the steps to get from here to there, imagine being there now and notice what that version of you thinks, feels, and does. Then embody those qualities as fully as possible in this present moment. This simple practice bypasses the struggle of trying to force change from within the paradigm that created the problem. You shift paradigms by becoming the person who inhabits a different reality. As You embody that person consistently, the external circumstances rearrange themselves to match because they are reflections of consciousness, not fixed conditions that consciousness must adapt to. If you apply this practice sincerely, you will see results quickly. Small things will shift, opportunities will appear, obstacles will dissolve. These early confirmations are important. They build faith, which is another word for the confidence that the universe responds to your consciousness. As faith builds, you can tackle larger aspects of your life: relationships, career, health, purpose. The same principles apply at all scales. Identify the reality you want to experience, become the version of you who naturally experiences that reality, and allow the external to rearrange itself in reflection of your internal shift. This is not manifestation through visualization or affirmations, though those can be useful tools. This is manifestation through identity, transformation through becoming at the level of being rather than just doing. When you change what you are, what you do changes automatically, and what happens to you changes in response. 3i Atlas did not try to survive the solar passage. It did not employ protective mechanisms or defensive strategies. It transformed. It absorbed energy that could have destroyed it and expressed that energy as a new form of radiation, a new state of being. This is the model for navigating the intense energies of personal transformation that you are experiencing or about to experience. Do not protect yourself from change. Do not try to maintain who you were in the face of forces that are calling you to evolve. Instead, open to the energy, let it move through you, and express it as your new form. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by improving its crawling technique. It dissolves into goo. Only then can the imaginal cells, which were always present but dormant, activate and organize the undifferentiated substance into an entirely new creature capable of flight. You have imaginal cells of consciousness, potentials that have been dormant, waiting for the right conditions to activate. The intense energies currently moving through the collective field are those right conditions. If you feel like your old identity is dissolving, if familiar structures are falling apart, if what used to give you security no longer works, congratulations. You're in the goo stage. Resist the temptation to frantically rebuild what was. Trust the process. The dissolution is necessary. What emerges on the other side will be so far beyond what you were that you will barely recognize yourself. And from that new perspective, you will understand that the struggle you experienced was not an obstacle to your transformation, but the very mechanism of it. 3i Atlas will continue its journey, eventually fading from our ability to observe as it recedes into the vastness of interstellar space. But the questions it raised will remain. Is it natural or artificial? Is it carrying information or intelligence? Why did it appear now at this particular moment in human history? These questions have no definitive answers because the phenomenon exists at the boundary between categories. It is in between, liminal, refusing to be captured by our either-or thinking. This is appropriate because the consciousness shift it catalyzes is also about transcending binary thinking, about moving from either-or to both, and from separation to integration. You do not have to choose between being spiritual or scientific, rational or intuitive, practical or mystical. You can integrate all these modes of knowing, using each where appropriate, recognizing that they are different lenses for viewing the same underlying reality. The scientists studying 3i Atlas with telescopes and spectrometers are accessing one level of truth. The mystics contemplating its symbolic significance are accessing another level. The truth is not in choosing between these approaches, but in recognizing that both are valid, both are necessary, and both are incomplete without the other. This integrated approach is what the emerging paradigm requires, not the replacement of science with spirituality or vice versa, but the synthesis of both into a larger framework that honors empirical observation while also acknowledging the role of consciousness in shaping what is observed. This is the frontier where the most profound discoveries will be made in the coming decades, not by those who reject science as materialist dogma and not by those who reject spirituality as wishful fantasy, but by those who bridge the two, who bring the rigor of scientific method to the exploration of consciousness and the wisdom of spiritual insight to the interpretation of scientific data. You are invited to participate in this frontier exploration, not necessarily as a professional researcher, though some reading this will take that path, but as a living experiment, a demonstration of what happens when consciousness awakens to its creative power and begins to operate intentionally rather than reactively. Every insight you gain, every limitation you transcend, every timeline you successfully navigate contributes to the collective knowledge base. You're a pioneer in consciousness territory that has been explored by mystics and sages throughout history, but is now being mapped in detail by a growing number of individuals from all walks of life. The map being created through your explorations will guide those who come after. Your successes will inspire them. Your mistakes will help them avoid pitfalls. Your courage to venture beyond the known will give them permission to do the same. This is sacred work, not in the sense of being religious, but in the sense of being fundamental, consequential, world-shaping. You are literally helping to create the new world by embodying new ways of being that were previously rare or hidden. As more individuals awaken and begin operating from dimensional awareness, the collective field shifts. What was once considered miraculous becomes normal. What was once dismissed as impossible becomes achievable. This is how evolution happens, not gradually over millennia, but in sudden leaps when critical mass is reached and a new level of organization becomes stable. Humanity is approaching such a leap. The appearance of objects like 3i Atlas, whether natural or artificial, whether coincidence or coordination, serves as a catalyst accelerating the process. You felt the pull of this acceleration when you chose to read about an obscure astronomical phenomenon. You recognized, perhaps unconsciously, that the story was not really about a comet, but about you, about your potential, about the universe inviting you to step into a larger version of yourself. That invitation is always present, but it intensifies during certain periods when the collective field is particularly conducive to transformation. We are in such a period now. The old paradigm is collapsing, not because it is being attacked, but because it is being outgrown. More and more people are having experiences that cannot be explained by materialist reductionism, are accessing information through non-ordinary means, are manifesting outcomes that defy statistical probability. These experiences are not anomalies to be explained away. They are harbingers of a new normal, previews of what becomes possible when consciousness is recognized as primary rather than derivative. Your role is to be fully yourself, which means the version of yourself that exists beyond conditioning, beyond limitation, beyond the small identity that you constructed to fit into a paradigm that was never adequate to contain what you truly are. As you shed that small identity, as you allow yourself to expand into the vastness that has always been your true nature, you become a beacon. Others will sense something different about you, even if they cannot articulate what it is. Some will be attracted, sensing that you have something they want, some key to a door they have not yet figured out how to open. Others will be repelled, uncomfortable with your refusal to play by the old rules, to validate the limitations they still believe are real. Both reactions are appropriate, and neither should concern you. You are not here to convince anyone or to prove anything to skeptics. You are here to demonstrate what is possible, to be a living example of conscious creation, to show through your experience that the universe is far more responsive and reality far more malleable than consensus admits. This demonstration does not require perfection. You will still face challenges, still make mistakes, still have days when the old patterns reassert themselves and you forget what you know. This is part of being human. The goal is not to become some idealized version of a spiritual being who has transcended all earthly concerns. The goal is to be fully human while awake, to engage with life's challenges from a place of knowing rather than fear, to navigate the dualities of existence while remaining anchored in the awareness of unity. 3i Atlas moving through our solar system is both subject to physical forces and expressing non-local intention. It is not one or the other, but both simultaneously. You are learning the same integration. To be fully present in your body, attending to practical necessities, engaging in relationships and work, while also being aware of yourself as infinite consciousness temporarily focused through a particular perspective. This both-in awareness is the hallmark of mature awakening, not escape from the world into transcendent bliss, and not being so lost in the world that you forget your transcendent nature, but the dynamic balance between the two, surfing the edge where form and formlessness meet. The edge is uncomfortable because it requires holding tension, living with paradox, accepting that ultimate questions do not have simple answers. But it is also where creativity happens, where new possibilities emerge, where you become a conduit for evolutionary forces shaping the future. As you embody this edge, you naturally attract experiences and relationships that match your frequency. Old connections may fade as you outgrow them. New connections will form with those operating at similar levels of awareness. This is not elitism or separation. It is resonance. You naturally align with those who match your vibrational signature. Just as radio tuned to FM frequencies cannot pick up AM signals, the signal is always broadcasting, but only receivers tuned to the right frequency can translate it into meaningful information. You are tuning yourself to frequencies that most of humanity has not yet accessed. This does not make you better, just different in function. A bird is not better than a fish. They are different expressions optimized for different environments. You are becoming optimized for the dimensional environment, for navigating probability space, for operating in realms where intention shapes outcome and consciousness directs energy. This optimization happens naturally as you practice, as you experiment, as you apply the principles consistently. Do not be discouraged if progress seems slow. You are literally rewiring neural pathways, reconfiguring energetic structures, and overriding decades of conditioning. This takes time and persistence. But every moment you spend in dimensional awareness, every choice you make from centered consciousness rather than reactive fear, strengthens the new patterns and weakens the old. Eventually, a tipping point is reached where the new patterns become dominant, where conscious creation becomes your default mode rather than something you have to remember to do. Once you reach that point, life becomes exponentially easier, not because challenges disappear, but because you stop fighting them. You learn to flow around obstacles, to use resistance as information rather than opposition, to find the path that serves your purpose while honoring the purposes of all other beings. This is Wu Wei, effortless action, moving in harmony with the Tao. It is not passivity, but perfect timing, acting from inspiration rather than desperation, allowing universal intelligence to guide your choices. 3I. Atlas does not force its path through space. It surrenders to gravity while maintaining direction. It uses the sun's energy rather than resisting it. It navigates through conditions as they are rather than as it wishes they were. This is strategic surrender, the wisdom of accepting what cannot be changed while actively shaping what can. You are learning this wisdom to discern between circumstances that require action and circumstances that require acceptance, to know when to push and when to yield, to recognize opportunities disguised as obstacles and obstacles disguised as opportunities. This discernment cannot be taught through rules or formulas. It develops through practice, through making mistakes, through learning to feel the subtle, energetic difference between aligned action and forced effort. Over time, you become fluent in this subtle language. You develop sensitivity to the yes and no of universal intelligence, speaking through your body, your emotions, your circumstances. When something is aligned, it feels expansive, even if challenging. When something is misaligned, it feels contractive, even if superficially appealing. This felt sense becomes your primary guidance system, more reliable than rational analysis or external advice. 3I. Atlas demonstrates this in its behavior. It is following an internal compass that guides it through space with apparent purpose. You have the same internal compass. Most people have been taught to ignore it, to override intuition with logic, to distrust feeling in favor of thinking. But as you awaken, you begin to trust the compass again. You learn that it was never broken, just temporarily ignored. As you follow your internal compass, your life begins to flow. Synchronicities multiply. Right people appear at right times, resources materialize to support your purpose. Doors open that you did not know existed. This is not magic in the sense of violating natural law. It is alignment with natural law at a deeper level than most people operate from. You are working with the grain of reality rather than against it, and reality responds by supporting your journey. The support does not mean absence of challenge. You will still face obstacles, still encounter resistance, still go through periods of uncertainty and doubt. But the quality changes. Challenges become opportunities for growth rather than punishments for inadequacy. Resistance becomes information about misalignment rather than evidence that you should give up. Uncertainty becomes the openness required for new possibilities to enter, rather than proof that you are lost. This reframe of difficulty is essential. If you interpret challenges as problems, you become a problem solver, perpetually fixing what is broken. But if you interpret challenges as invitations to evolve, you become an evolutionary agent, using everything that arises as catalyst for transformation. 3i Atlas was challenged by the sun's gravity and radiation. It did not resist or try to avoid the challenge. It moved through it and emerged transformed. You are being challenged by the circumstances of your life, by the limitations of your conditioning, by the gap between who you have been and who you are becoming. Do not resist. Do not try to avoid. Move through it. Let the intensity transform you. On the other side, you will be glowing with your own light, navigating with your own intelligence, free from the need for external validation or permission. This freedom is not isolation, it is sovereignty, the ability to participate fully in collective life while maintaining clarity about your own truth, your own path, your own purpose. You do not need everyone to understand or approve. You only need to be true to what you know, to honor the intelligence that moves through you, to trust that the universe supports those who trust it. This trust is not naive faith that everything will work out exactly as you hope. It is mature recognition that even outcomes you did not prefer serve your evolution, that every experience contains gifts even if they are not immediately apparent, that the universe is fundamentally benevolent even when individual circumstances appear harsh. This benevolence is not personal in the sense that the universe cares about you specifically more than anything else. It is impersonal in the sense that universal intelligence is biased toward growth, evolution, the expansion of consciousness, and the exploration of possibility. Whatever serves those ends is supported. Whatever resists them encounters friction. Your life flows when you align with the evolutionary impulse, when you say yes to growth, when you embrace transformation. Your life stagnates when you resist, when you cling to safety, when you prioritize comfort over expansion. The choice is always yours. Every moment offers this choice. Contraction or expansion, fear or love, resistance or acceptance. The accumulated effect of these micro-choices determines the trajectory of your life. Just as countless small course corrections keep 3i Atlas on its intended path, your countless small choices create the path you ultimately walk. Choose consciously. Choose from the highest perspective you can access in each moment. Choose with awareness that you are not just deciding what to do, but who to be. And know that every choice that aligns with your truth, that honors your integrity, that serves your evolution, is automatically a choice that serves the collective, because all consciousness is ultimately one. What heals you heals the field. What you overcome makes it easier for others to overcome. What you demonstrate as possible expands the boundaries of the possible for everyone. You are not on this journey for yourself alone. You are a fractal expression of the whole, and what happens in your life ripples through the entire system in ways you may never see but are nonetheless real. So embrace the responsibility, not as burden but as opportunity. The opportunity to participate consciously in the grand unfolding, to be an agent of evolution rather than a passive recipient of circumstances, to demonstrate through your lived experience that reality is indeed participatory and consciousness is indeed creative. If you focus on the evidence of intelligence and design, you reinforce the presence of intelligence and design working through your circumstances. If you focus on the dimensional nature of the object, on its ability to navigate probability space, you activate your own dimensional navigation capabilities. This is not positive thinking, this is quantum selection. You are choosing which version of reality to observe, and in observing it, you make it real. Begin practicing dimensional awareness in small ways. When faced with a decision, instead of asking which choice is correct, ask which timeline you want to inhabit. Instead of trying to figure out how to achieve a goal, ask which version of you naturally possesses what you desire and step into that identity. Instead of looking for signs that your manifestation is working, recognize that every moment contains infinite signs pointing toward infinite possibilities, and you select which signs to notice. This shift from trying to allowing, from forcing to selecting, from seeking to embodying, This is the operational key that unlocks dimensional technology. The object that passed through our solar system demonstrated this principle through its behavior. It did not struggle against gravity or fight to reach its destination. It moved through space with the ease of something following natural law, yet it navigated with apparent intelligence toward outcomes that served its purpose. This combination of surrender and direction, of flowing with universal forces while maintaining intentional aim, this is the balance you are learning. You do not need to micromanage every detail of how your desires manifest. The universe is far more creative and capable than your conscious mind, but you do need to maintain clarity about what you want and why you want it, providing the directional intelligence that allows universal forces to organize on your behalf. The scientists tracking 3I Atlas had no control over the object. They could only observe and interpret, yet their observation was not passive. It shaped what data was collected, which features were noticed, how anomalies were categorized. The same is true for your observation of your own life. You cannot control every event, but your observation of events shapes their meaning and determines which future possibilities they open or close. Two people can experience identical circumstances and have completely different outcomes, based solely on how they observe and interpret what happens. One sees obstacles and becomes discouraged. Another sees opportunities and becomes energized. The external facts are the same, but the internal response collapses different futures. This is why gratitude is so powerful in manifestation practice. Not because the universe rewards positive people, but because gratitude is an observational stance that notices abundance, and what you notice expands. When you observe with gratitude, you collapse possibilities that contain more to be grateful for. When you observe with complaint, you collapse possibilities that validate your complaints. The universe is a perfect mirror, neutral and responsive, reflecting back precisely what you project through your observational lens. 3I Atlas showed us a baffling glow because we were looking for mysteries. If we had been looking only for confirmation of existing models, we might have dismissed the anomalies as measurement error or observational noise. What you seek determines what you find because seeking shapes looking and looking shapes reality. The dimensional hypothesis that consciousness can navigate probability space is not New Age fantasy. It is a serious interpretation of quantum mechanics taken to its logical conclusion. If observation collapses quantum states at the particle level, and if everything including large objects and life forms is made of quantum particles, then observation should theoretically be able to influence outcomes at all scales. The reason we don't see this obviously is because of decoherence, the rapid collapse of superposition caused by environmental interactions. But a sufficiently coherent consciousness, one that maintains focus without internal contradiction, could potentially influence outcomes even at macro scale. This is what sages and mystics have been saying for millennia. That disciplined consciousness can perform miracles, that reality bends for those who truly believe. That the kingdom of heaven, meaning the realm where desire and manifestation are one, is within you, accessible through consciousness rather than external circumstances. The teachings are converging. Ancient wisdom and modern physics are arriving at the same conclusions through different routes. Reality is participatory. Consciousness is fundamental. The observer and observed are entangled. What happens depends on who is watching and how they watch. 3I Atlas became a mystery because it was observed by a civilization wrestling with these questions, ready to see something that challenged materialism, but not yet unified enough in perspective to collapse the ambiguity into certainty. Future interstellar visitors may be less ambiguous if collective consciousness evolves toward greater coherence and clarity about the nature of reality. Your role in this evolution is significant. Every individual who masters dimensional awareness, who learns to navigate timelines consciously, who demonstrates that consciousness shapes reality, contributes to the morphic field that makes it easier for others to do the same. You are not just working on your personal manifestations, you are pioneering techniques and perspectives that will eventually become common knowledge. You are part of the leading edge of consciousness evolution on this planet. The fact that you all were drawn to this transmission, that you stayed with it through all the details about an obscure astronomical object, reveals that you are ready for this role. Something in you recognized the deeper message beneath the scientific narrative. That message is your validation and your invitation. Validation that what you have sensed is true, that reality is far more fluid than consensus admits, that you possess capabilities that most people have not yet awakened to. An invitation to step fully into those capabilities, to stop hedging and doubting, to commit to the path of conscious creation with the same determination that ancient civilizations committed to building monuments or exploring continents. This is the great work of your lifetime, not some hobby or side interest, but the central purpose that gives meaning to everything else. You came here to demonstrate what is possible when consciousness remembers its creative nature. 3i. Atlas came from beyond the stars to remind you of this purpose, to confirm that the universe supports those who dare to transcend ordinary limitations. If you found resonance in this exploration, if something within you lit up, recognizing